On the afternoon of June 26, 1988, beneath a wide and cloudless Alsatian sky, the Airbus A320 was meant to announce a new era in aviation, a symbol of technological confidence, precision and safety, yet instead it would write its name into history through fire, smoke and controversy. Air France Flight 296Q was not scheduled like a normal commercial service. It was a celebratory charter flight, conceived as both a showcase and a spectacle, carrying passengers who were not merely travelers but guests, winners of promotional contests, journalists, aviation enthusiasts, families and children, many of whom had never flown before and now found themselves stepping aboard the most advanced commercial aircraft ever built. The Airbus A320, with its fly-by-wire flight control system and computer-mediated handling, represented a philosophical shift in aviation, one where pilots no longer directly controlled the aircraft through mechanical cables alone but through electronic signals interpreted and moderated by onboard computers. This particular aircraft, only months old, was the 9th A320 ever produced and was about to perform its very first passenger flight. Its destination was modest, almost deceptively so: the small airfield at Mulhouse, Habsheim in eastern France, chosen for its accessibility and for the airshow that would draw thousands of spectators eager to witness modern aviation up close. The crew assigned to the flight were among the most experienced Airbus pilots in France. Captain Michel Asseline was a veteran aviator, deeply involved in training programs and thoroughly familiar with Airbus philosophy, while his first officer, Pierre Mézières, was similarly seasoned and trusted. Both men believed in the aircraft, believed in its systems, and believed they understood its limitations. The flight plan, however, was unusual and risky by its very nature. After departing Paris and stopping briefly at Basel Mulhouse Airport, the aircraft would fly to Habsheim and perform a low-altitude flypast over the runway, gear down, flaps extended, engines at low thrust, passing just 100 feet above the ground to demonstrate the aircraft's stability at slow speeds. This was not a maneuver commonly performed by large commercial jets, and certainly not with passengers on board, yet the atmosphere of celebration and confidence dulled the perception of risk. The airfield itself was poorly documented, its charts lacking detail, particularly the presence of dense woodland rising beyond the end of the runway. The crew had not visited the site before, nor had they conducted a detailed reconnaissance flight, relying instead on basic diagrams and assumptions shaped by experience at far larger airports. As the Airbus descended toward Habsheim, the mood inside the cabin was light. Cameras clicked, children pressed their faces to windows, and the aircraft's smooth flight reinforced the sense that this was a moment of history being witnessed safely and comfortably. On the ground, thousands of spectators gathered along the perimeter of the airfield, their attention fixed on the horizon. When the white fuselage of the A320 appeared, gliding silently closer, applause rippled through the crowd. Yet from the cockpit, subtle deviations were already accumulating. The aircraft was descending lower than intended. The airspeed was slower than planned. The altitude, instead of stabilizing at 100 feet, crept downward toward 30. At such a height, there was no margin for delay, no room for hesitation, no buffer against error. The engines were at idle, a configuration chosen deliberately to emphasize the aircraft's ability to fly slowly and stably, but one that left little immediate thrust available should something go wrong. As the runway rushed beneath them, the Airbus skimmed the airfield at treetop height, so low that spectators could see individual rivets along the fuselage. Some cheered louder, unaware that what they were witnessing was not mastery but danger. The aircraft continued forward, still descending slightly, its flight control computers prioritizing stall protection over aggressive pitch response. When the crew finally initiated a go-around, advancing the thrust levers and commanding the aircraft to climb, the engines did not respond instantly. Jet engines take time to spool up from idle, precious seconds that vanished as the dark green wall of forest beyond the runway filled the cockpit windows. The right wing struck the treetops first, followed almost immediately by the left. The impact tore metal and fuel lines apart, rupturing tanks, igniting a fireball that erupted beneath the wings. The aircraft slammed into the forest floor, skidding and tearing through brush and soil before coming to rest engulfed in flames. Inside the cabin, the sudden violence transformed joy into terror. Passengers were thrown forward against seatbelts, overhead bins burst open, Smoke flooded the aisles and the heat rose instantly. The cabin lights failed, plunging survivors into darkness pierced only by firelight and the screams of those trapped. Flight attendants, many injured themselves, shouted commands, forcing open jammed doors, directing panicked passengers toward any available exit. One emergency slide failed to deploy properly, tangled among branches, forcing people to jump directly into burning debris. Despite the chaos, acts of courage unfolded everywhere. Strangers helped strangers. Parents shielded children. Crew members returned again and again into smoke-filled sections of the cabin, ignoring the heat searing their skin. Yet not everyone could escape. A teenage boy, paralyzed and unable to move without assistance, was trapped in his seat. A young girl was pinned when her seat collapsed forward. A woman who had reached safety turned back into the smoke to help them. None survived. 3 lives were lost, not from the impact itself but from the fire and smoke that followed. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the fire's intensity and the aircraft's position within the forest complicated rescue efforts. Survivors staggered into clearings, many burned, many in shock, some wandering aimlessly, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Incredibly, 133 people survived, a number that testified to the structural integrity of the aircraft and the effectiveness of evacuation training, even as it underscored the fragility of life at such low altitude. As smoke drifted upward and the crowd stood silent, the celebration that had drawn thousands to Habsheim dissolved into stunned disbelief. What had been intended as a demonstration of safety had become a public catastrophe. The investigation that followed was immediate, exhaustive, and fiercely contested. French aviation authorities analyzed flight data, cockpit recordings, engine performance, pilot actions, and environmental factors. Their conclusion was stark. The crash resulted from pilot error. According to investigators, the aircraft was flown too low, too slow, with insufficient thrust, and the go-around was initiated too late for recovery. They found no mechanical failure in the engines or flight control systems. Airbus defended its design vigorously, emphasizing that the aircraft behaved exactly as programmed and that its protections functioned correctly. But Captain Asseline rejected these findings, arguing that the aircraft's automated systems limited engine response and pitch authority at the worst possible moment, effectively preventing recovery. He insisted that the fly-by-wire system behaved unpredictably at very low altitude and that pilots were not fully informed of its limitations. The controversy deepened as the case moved into the courts. Accusations surfaced regarding the handling of flight recorders, claims that data had been altered or misinterpreted, and debates over whether Airbus, Air France, or regulatory authorities shared responsibility. In the end, the courts sided largely with the official investigation. Captain Asseline and other crew members were convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Asseline served time in prison, becoming a symbol of the human cost of systemic failure and the tension between innovation and accountability. For many pilots worldwide, the verdict sent a chilling message. In an era of increasing automation, ultimate responsibility still rested on human shoulders, even when machines intervened between intention and outcome. The crash of Flight 296Q reshaped aviation practices in ways that extended far beyond France. Demonstration flights with passengers were re-evaluated. Minimum altitudes and airshow procedures were tightened. Pilot training emphasized deeper understanding of automation logic, engine response delays, and energy management at low altitude. The Airbus A320 program continued, eventually becoming one of the most successful aircraft families in history, but its baptism by fire left an indelible mark. The accident became a case study taught in flight schools and safety seminars around the world, a reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, cannot eliminate risk when human ambition pushes boundaries too far. For survivors, the memory never faded. For families of the dead, the knowledge that the flight was never meant to land at Habsheim, never meant to descend so low, never meant to place spectacle above safety became a lifelong burden. And for aviation itself, Flight 296Q remains a haunting lesson carved into history. That progress must be matched by humility, that trust in machines must be balanced by respect for physics, and that the sky, though mastered by technology, remains utterly unforgiving of miscalculation.